Hey guys, it's a tough act to follow that one, huh? I'm not so sure about our rapping skills, but
We'll do our best. We'll
But
try to make
as
this
you saw,
interesting.
it's all about pink, right?
yeah, exactly. You do have the pink trousers, which works well. So the title of the panel was something that we discussed with Sven for a little bit, and the whole failures versus successes. We actually wanted to focus more on the failures, and not because this is going to be a negative panel, but because failures cost money. And there was a really good panel earlier with Hjalmar and Nordzone team and a couple of other people that were talking about fundraising and how you can succeed in fundraising and what's a successful fundraise look like. But you know what? You probably can make that money go further if you make less mistakes on key things. And those key things, just because we have a limited amount of time, those key things are going to be around 1, people, 2, marketing and sales, and 3, product. If we have time, we'll do fundraising mistakes. But the idea, the goal of the panel is to touch upon things that we have seen that have been critical in creating problems for companies at the earliest of stages. And just so that we know, so you guys know who we are, we were kindly introduced, but we'll say a little bit about ourselves, and maybe we just go in this order, and then I'll ask the first question to you, Sten. Conveniently, you're at the very end. So my name is Carlos. I'm one of the 2 managing partners at SeedCamp. SeedCamp's been a huge champion of Estonia from the very beginning. We backed Taavet and Christo at TransferWise, and recently we backed Tavi at Salve. And you know, we have over 380 companies that we've backed over the last 12 years. Big names, as you know, TransferWise, Revolut, UiPath, and others.
Hi everyone, my name is Marvin. So I'm a former partner of 500 Startups. 500 Startups is the biggest and most active seed fund on the planet. I ran the San Francisco office and the accelerator program there. So just over the last 6 years, I've invested in over 414 companies. And prior to that, I was an operator. So I was in startups for a couple years. And I was executive at Yahoo for about 10.5 years.
My name is Sten, and I'm a software entrepreneur. I've been building companies for the last few decades. Spent many years at Skype. Most recently started a company called Teleport. And after this getting acquired, I'm a chief product officer at Topia. And I'm a proud investor in both SeedCamp and 500 Startups.
There we go. So
very nice. Sorry, Carlos, here you go, buddy. You want the questions? We got the tablet, the technology. People's questions are going to show up there. Good work, boss.
Kes utlis mjau. Sorry, my Estonian's not very good, so please ask them in English. So until questions start coming in, I'll go through kind of those 3 points, right? So we're going to talk about people issues, marketing sales issues, and product issues. So Sten, let's start with you. You know, you've been an operator several times now, and you had the chance to work as an EIR within Andreessen, angel investor. You've seen a lot of company issues as an investor. What's the number 1 or 2, 3 things that you see that creates a massive problem within an organization from the people point of view, from the HR point of view?
I think in the earliest startup phases, the biggest sort of issue or the framing of the issues is the schizophrenic situation between everybody tells you and intuitively you know that you need to hire the best people possible. On the other side, you're on a shoestring budget building something that nobody knows about, and you're lucky that anybody is willing to work with you. And sort of balancing those 2 things, and it's nice for Google or Facebook or UiPath to say that, okay, we'll hire the best data scientist on the planet, but in reality, you will probably take whoever comes in. Just because you need to ship something, you need to get something in hands of the users, you need to get something in front of investors, and so forth. And getting out of that phase, as you raise money, as you actually become more seriously, as your business starts forming, and then really putting a stake in the ground and saying, okay, from this point forward, we're not going to compromise on people anymore. And I've seen so many teams that initially you sort of scramble, you get your friends on board, and then you don't let go. And like, you don't have any more of those excuses that, hey, you should sort of, like, we don't have the money to hire the best or whatnot. And I think that's the crucial job of the founder, is to sort of really, really get the right people at any given moment, at any week, any month, any year of the company in, and have this cold heart of letting go of the people who have done their contribution, helped you, and so forth. And especially on that latter point, I see a lot of young founders who say that, okay, we have these 2 developers. I know that they're probably not going to scale, but we're going to keep using them. And 6 months later, they're still there. 12 months later, they're still there, and so forth. Especially in Estonia, where everybody knows everyone. It's your best friends, it's your classmates, it's so forth. Where you go into San Francisco, the job market and everything is much more dynamic. So this team formation is much more dynamic, and there's much less of this personal drama about it. So I think staying true to this, what does the company need? What does the company need for this stage? Being grateful for the people who are contributing, but at the same time switching the team when you have to.
Yeah, and actually I want to comment on that. One thing that's interesting that I've noticed is that as you're bringing in those new people, another big cancer, and this actually is an issue that can also plague the founding team, is not having very clear role definition. So as you're hiring all these new people, then all of a sudden the person who was ahead of whatever now is sharing one element of their job, 20% with this new hire, and then now there's a little bit of conflict there. And if you don't start organizing the company in a way where everyone's clear what it is that you're going to be doing with new hires coming in, you end up start having some politics forming, and you start having some conflict, which then manifests itself with one person feeling they're underperforming because this other person's blocking me. And so that's another thing to keep in mind. Marvin, what?
Yeah, there's, I mean, so many issues on the people side. I think number one, of just making sure the founders, like if you have a founder or co-founder, like making sure that you're actually on the same page on what you actually want to build and the type of company you want to build. Like some founders where they start and like, this is a cool project or whatever, cool product, but one founder actually wants to go big and raise VC money, and the other one's like, no, I actually want this to be a bootstrap business, and I see a lot of that all the time. Or we get an offer to sell, and it's like $10 million, and one founder's like, no, we're going to go all the way, and the other founder's like, no, I actually want this money now. I see a lot of that. The other thing too is actually the type of culture that you're looking to build, and I see this a lot too, particularly in Europe and Asia too, where I actually think about sort of like 2 cultures, right? There is the culture of the family. We're family, right? And so we treat everybody sort of like, it's not, you should treat everyone well in general, but there's like, this is a family, but there are weaknesses with the family. It's like, you know, it's like crazy Uncle Joe, he's been with us for a year or 2, he's a little bit wacky, not doing the job anymore, but like they're family, so we tolerate that. Versus, in my opinion, I think when you're running a company, it should be a professional team, right? You're here while you perform, and you can be part of the team while you perform, but the minute you stop performing, we trade you out. And I actually think that you have to be thoughtful about this from day one. And a lot of mistakes I see a lot of times is they run it like a family and not a professional team.
Yeah, that word family has been a double-edged sword. It can make people feel really welcome, but can also prevent, you can't fire your mom. So family is also a tricky one.
And backing out of that later is super hard.
Super hard to change the
It's all of a sudden
of
you kill the family.
Yeah.
Like if you're 3 years in and you say that, okay, we are a high-performing sports team, everybody's like, what? I didn't join for that.
Yeah.
So it's better to get it right going out.
Yeah. Now, on a topic you brought up about internationalization, Sten, maybe you can comment on this as well, because you ran a very international company. And I suspect a lot of the Estonian companies here will probably have multi-offices as they expand. So how do you keep cultural alignment when you start having to hire people from abroad, whether it be remote workers or whether it be you're expanding into London or somewhere else? What did you see works?
Oh, well, that's 2 hours right there. Distributed teams. I think for distributed teams, I have this very condensed sort of principle that I read from the guys at Lallabot, which is a sort of open source development company. And basically, the rule is has 3 components. You need to meet frequently, congregate occasionally, and then there was the 3rd one. See.
Can't help you there, Sten.
So basically the idea is that like you need to have one-to-one video calls with every single one of the team members, like every week, half an hour, their time, so forth. Then there is this meeting frequently, is getting the team on a call, having these channels, these sort of Slack channels, water cooler chats, all these things. And then there needs to be a physical component to that, which was a long time Skype learning that we had, was that it's you can build human relationships face to face, and then you can maintain them by video calls. Doing the opposite is super hard.
Yeah.
So I think that's another mistake that companies may do in this day and age where like distributed work is so natural and talent is everywhere and you can get access to and find great people, is you think that, okay, now they're all around and you sort of save money with that. Actually, there is a significant overhead cost of running a distributed team and sort of having I don't know, TransferWise is like 2,000 people, they still meet like every 6 or 12 months.
Yeah.
And this is super important to align the culture, align people, build this trust, have those beers together so that you can continue running the business by video calls later. It's a little bit easier when you actually are creating an office somewhere. And there, my experience has been to take people who are the culture carriers, the super nodes of culture in your organization, and place them there at the new site, at least temporarily.
Yeah.
So sending...
I think that's critical because like one of the challenges, so that's when you've decided strategically going to start up a new remote office, but there's like one interim step, which is sometimes I've seen companies try to hire a team remotely with a manager remotely, and if that manager hasn't spent enough time with the local, with the headquarters, you end up having a subculture that forms around that manager, and then when there's something going on wrong, the two things aren't synced up. So it is critical to have, if you're going to start having a remote office, to have the transplant from the original source, not just hire a manager remotely.
Recently, we, now almost 2 years ago at Topia, we acquired a company which had an office in Seattle and Dublin. We had no people at those places. So in order to integrate the engineering teams, I asked our VP engineering to actually move from London to Seattle for 2 years. So it's like the top engineering executive went to that new site because I can be more comfortable with people that he left behind already running in the culture that we want to have because there's continuity there, but having this top executive's presence in a new location was crucial.
I mean, I think about sort of whether it's a remote team, distributed team, or just even the same office and bring new folks, like onboarding, like this is one problem. A lot of startups do not think about onboarding at all, and this is actually a critical piece. There's a process piece, and in regards to the culture, just like a lot of times, like you're gonna get a culture regardless of whether you design it or not. So sometimes it's actually just even a matter of actually sitting down with your team and actually writing down and discussing them and actually documenting this stuff. Documentation is actually very helpful to help at least figure out or get close to that.
Yeah.
And now I remember the third rule.
What was it?
Write liberally.
Write liberally.
Meet frequently, congregate occasionally.
Love it.
Because a lot of that is writing.
Great. I'm going to move on to the next subject, but I am reading these questions, and I'm just going to quickly do a round fire to answer this one particular question. It says, what's the best way to find co-founders? I have a product ready to launch, but it's still one-man orchestra. My recommendation is having a co-founder is like being married. It's very hard to get rid of a co-founder. It is somebody you're going to spend a lot of time with. So if you can, I know this is probably something you've already done, but if you can find it through your network, your existing social network, somebody that you might have an existing social relationship with, it'll mean so much more because you have a more mature relationship.
My answer to that is don't find look for a co-founder, but just launch it yourself and figure it out. I don't believe this idea, like a lot of VCs give you this advice that usually is horrible. It's like, you know, we only fund like companies that have like 2 founders or 3 co-founders. I'm like, yeah, but it has to happen organically.
Yeah.
Like, don't just find somebody at some hackathon and just like, you're gonna be my co-founder. That just causes you way more challenges and issues.
Agreed.
And if you don't have that network, one way to build that network is go and work somewhere. I think that's an argument. For example, if you're 18 and you're starting a company, you don't have a graph of people, new experience of working with some people. If you're a non-technical founder and you want to work with the best engineer, you don't know who's the best engineer. But if you go and work for another company that is already on a growth curve, you will learn a lot, you will build that network, and so if you start the company 2 or 3 years later, you might be better equipped. So I think that's, if that's one of the gaps, that you're not the kind of person who can build alone, then spend time with those people in some other format before starting.
Cool, so on that, let's transition to mistakes in product development, product design. So there's a question that came up here, which is there any way to protect my unicorn idea from being stolen by a bigger company? And I think maybe we can define what product is and what an idea is. At the end of the day, I think ideas are a dime a dozen. It's about execution. So let's start off with that execution of building something. One of the things that I found is a mistake is when product isn't owned by the company, rather it's owned by a contractor or arm's length contractor, because then that execution isn't in-house, and that execution is harder to transfer over to somebody. So, you know, we've desperately tried to help founders that have that kind of non-coding capability internally, because you want to be supportive as a early stage fund, but it's just always been very difficult. But maybe you guys want to add to what issues have you seen have been mistakes in product development?
I mean, for me, the biggest issue with product, like here's how I think about it, right? If you, as an investor, you look at a lot of these different businesses, and most of the time when a company fails, it's usually not like technical risk, in my opinion. You can always figure out the product piece, but one of the biggest problems I see is that a lot of times, and this is particular from the CE region as well too, you have a lot of strongly technical founders. And this is tied into sort of sales and marketing too. A lot of times you spend way more time building and not enough time actually validating whether they're building for the right people or building the right thing. And so they go, yeah, everyone's going to use my product, but they don't validate it, so they spend their precious time and money building this thing, and it's like 6 months, 9 months, a year, and they go back out and you're like, oh crap, like I just wasted a year, or sometimes it's longer. And so I don't know if product is, for me, is like the biggest issue.
Yeah, it's being in touch with the customer. Yeah, it's done.
Yeah, that one is definitely the one that I'm guilty of most. Like as a technologist, you have this knee-jerk reaction to any problem is to build something to fix it, which is rarely the sensible thing to do. I think the landscape has become a little bit more less binary and more of a gradient, because with all these no-code tools and all these other ways how to quickly experiment, like maybe instead of going and interviewing 100 users for a week, maybe you can build a prototype in a day and test it in another day, and you're actually faster. So there is a scenario where you should build stuff, but I think the mistake there is not time boxing those experiments.
Yeah,
like
right.
if the company goes and the team spends 6 months building something not showing anybody, the probability of failing is just too high. But if the team consciously says that, okay, we're going to build for 5 days, and then 1 weekend of live testing, and if we get to result X or Y, then we decide if we kill or not. Yeah. And like this very crisp time box, definite measured activity, I think is fine. But very often if it's, like our CEO, Atopia currently says, his favorite term is loosey-goosey. If things are loosey-goosey, then they fail.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I can tell a company's dead, so I'd one of the portfolio companies, and they'd raised, I think probably like 4 or 5 million, I think it was like $4.5 million, and one of the things, like, their business kind of grew, and then it kind of started to slow down. And I was talking to the CEO and the CTO, I'm just like, all right, so seems like there's some issues, revenue's slowing down, and there's some problem. Like, what is your solution to this? He's like, hire more engineers and build more features. I'm like, you are dead. You are dead. Mm-hmm. That's the wrong answer. You can't build your way out of a slowing business, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, there's almost always scope creep in the product to try to solve yourself out of a problem, but in reality, it's poor product market fit with the customer. But if we kind of go down that path, maybe another point to talk about, and maybe Marvin, you can comment on this. So as investors, we get approached with a lot of companies to look at their product, and the product development quality is now at a pretty good bar. And I think, how do you guys see, and what do you see as the best way to make sure that when you are also experimenting, that you have a fidelity level that is at the level that customers and investors care about? Because it's easy to cut corners in places, but you're judged harshly on I heard this funny quote about like how some LPs don't invest in funds based upon if the portfolio or their website looks like it's not quite up to the standard that you'd expect their companies to be.
Yeah.
So I don't know, what would you say to that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think here's my answer: is that it depends, right? So, for example, if it's a consumer product in general, I'm a lot less tolerant about sort of like low-quality consumer products. It's so unforgiving. Versus if it's B2B, honestly, because the bar is so low in general for look at awful products like SAP and like Oracle and Salesforce and stuff, just the bar is low. And so I'm actually a little bit more tolerant where I'm like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just sort of, it works well enough. And so that's kind of how I look at sort of like the gradient of how I judge.
Yeah, I think it's the good old framework, is your product a vitamin or a painkiller? Like, can people live without it, or is it like a nice to have lifestyle changing thing? And I think that defines a lot of that bar. If you've really stumbled upon a painkiller, if you have a fintech of, I don't know, TransferWise, like, okay, you can transfer your money now in 10 seconds. There's one box where you enter the number, and all the other flows are kind of standard, like entering credit card details or bank account stuff and whatnot. Like that can be relatively